What does a contraction feel like? How do I know if I'm in labor? And what does a day of labor look like? Wait, is this normal? Hey, I'm Heidi. My best friends call me Hides. I'm a certified birth doula, host of this podcast, and author of Birth Story, an interactive pregnancy guidebook. I have supported hundreds of women through their labor and deliveries, and I believe every one of them, and you, deserves a microphone and a stage. So here we are. Listen each week to get answers to these tough questions. Birth Story, where we talk about pregnancy, labor, deliveries, where we tell our stories and share our feelings. And of course, chat about our favorite baby products and motherhood. And because I'm passionate about birth outcomes, you will hear from some of the top experts in labor and delivery. Whether you are pregnant, trying desperately to get pregnant, or you just love a good birth story, I hope you will stick around and be part of this Birth Story family. Hey guys, I love the episode today with Holly Swenson. She is the author of Stop, Drop, Grow, and Glow. It is a book that is all about the 5 rights of parenting, self-care, and just being the best version of ourselves for mirroring that to our children so that they can come back to this world with some of those boundaries and love and self-care as we raise them to be their own little people, and how that starts on day 1. When you lift the baby up to your chest and that baby is still connected by the umbilical cord and you can't let go of them, you can't give them to someone else, you have to be skin to skin. It starts right there. That's number 5 in her framework, is the love. And then you can listen to this episode for the other 4 rights of parenting that come before that one. And you can get the full snapshot of this amazing philosophy in the book, Stop, Drop, Grow, and Glow. And you can follow Holly on Instagram. Everything's linked in the show notes. I really hope that you enjoy this episode. And there is a little bit of her story at the beginning. She has 4 boys, and the first pregnancy was twins. Welcome. Before we get started with this episode, I just wanted to share a little bit about an adventure that I have on Instagram. My Instagram handle is birth.story.academy, and I have been doing something in stories called Birthbound. Birthbound is where I tell birth stories in real time as I, the doula, leave for a birth. And then I update the audience as the birth unfolds. So if you love birth stories, then I would invite you to join me on Instagram at birth.story.academy and watch my stories for Birthbounds. After 23 years of doing birth work as a doula, I have less than a 10% cesarean section rate. That is an 87% relative risk reduction of having a cesarean section if you were in my care. And the question then becomes why? While I've been to the operating room many times, I've only been to the operating room 3 times if a client was in spontaneous labor and did not have any medical interventions. 3 out of 1,300. I've also only seen shoulder dystocia 2 times. 2 out of 1,300. And while my clients are not fully protected from having cesarean sections, medical interventions, and birth trauma even, the vast majority of those who go through Birth Story Academy in my program end up with positive, happy, non-traumatic births where they and their partners feel really empowered throughout the process. So in Birth Story Academy, you will learn about hospital policies and procedures, pelvic mechanics, the stages of labor, interventions, pain management options, how you can advocate for yourself, how your partner can advocate for you. It is 6 hours of information, and it also comes with the Birth Story Pregnancy Guidebook and Journal. You can go to birthstory.com and use code LOVE to receive $50 off. I would love to see you in class, have you part of my community, and start working towards a positive, informed, educated birth experience. And if you're just here for birth stories, that's okay too. Thanks for being here. Hey, Holly, welcome to the Birth Story podcast.
Hi, Heidi. Thank you so much for having me on.
You're welcome. I'm very excited because you're a Montanan. And those that are listening to the podcast know I spend my summers in Montana and I love it. Thanks so much for being here and sharing all about your book and your business. But before we get started, you have 4 boys.
I sure do. Yes, we have.
Wow.
We have twins. We started with twins, and then we had two to follow.
Okay. I always wanted 4 boys. I'll be totally honest. I even named them in high school. Like I visioned it. And then I had 2 boys. And I was so overwhelmed with parenting, which we're going to talk about today, that I was like, shop is closed after 2. So
It's good to know your boundaries. It's good to know where you need to call it.
yeah.
So
And I also think it's so interesting that you can have these dreams and visions and then reality of life sets in. And sometimes we have to pivot. And that was one way in which now I will say they're 9 and 10 now. And I do have a little bit of regret. Like, I wish I could have pushed through the postpartum depression and just had gone forward. But the postpartum depression and anxiety and parenting, because mine are only 1 year apart, it was like boom, boom, which I know yours are like boom, boom, boom with
yeah.
the three, well, the 4 kids, but the 3 pregnancies. And yeah, it got a little overwhelming. But sometimes I dream of like that oops, the mid 40s, oops.
I think that's real. I think you're always like questioning, especially as a mom, like when you're done, if you should have more. It's a delicate thing to kind of balance and assess. But I think it's also a lot. And I think a lot of parents don't really know what they're fully getting themselves into until they, really welcome that first child. And then a second one, there's a lot of reality. There's a lot of sleepless nights. There's a lot that goes into it. So I think it just unfolds differently for each mother and father.
It really does. Now, your book, Stop, Drop, Grow, and Glow, talks a lot about the rights of parenting. There's a framework for parenting, and then kind of how we get back to self care. So, we're going to dive into that. But I look at your book and I look at your sort of like coaching program, and I think, well, it started somewhere. And so I want to share about, or I want you to share, I'm not going to share your story, but I want you to share about your journey to parenthood and your pregnancies. So I know the first, like your inauguration into parenthood is twins. How did that go?
Well, I will say it was really exciting. I think we weren't anticipating it. I'm very much in love with my husband and have been since the day we met. I've been very blessed in that way. And, we didn't have any difficulty conceiving. And then, it kind of continued to we kept getting blessed. But starting with twins was really, I think when they told us that, there's 2 heartbeats, we were like, wow, we were not anticipating that. But it was such a blessing. And we just, I think we were just overwhelmed with joy. I mean, we were both in a place where we could really take that on. And I know for some people, when they get that news, they're like, oh my gosh, there's a lot that goes into raising children. There's financial stress, there's emotional stress, there's, can I be available for my family? So there's a lot of things to unpack, but we were in a great place to welcome it. And so we started with twins, and I loved being pregnant, even with twins. Like at the end, I had a really hard time getting out of bed because I'm kind of a petite person. And so I literally ran out of room, but they came a few weeks early, but they were healthy and, just a blessing. And then our third came literally a year late. Like they're all born in July. So our twins were beginning of July. Our third was born the end of July of the following year. And then our other son came a couple years after that. So we had 4 under the age of 4. So it was, quite the rodeo that we were.
I was like, yes, I'm like, rodeo is one way to put that. It is sort of nice, though, I will say, because mine are back to back a year apart also. And there was something about kind of being in that season of life all at once. And then each stage has kind of been all together versus one 10-year-old and one newborn. I'm one of five, and we are 25 years apart, Holly, from.
Well, and that takes a special mom to be able to do that because I'm with you on the split. I like that we've been able to grow together, and I think it would be hard to start over, when you're that far in,
Yeah.
So kudos to all those mamas who do it.
Yeah, exactly. My mom was teens, 20s, 30s, 40s. So she just kept going, it's just, and I really love it because, we say the bigs kind of helped raise the littles, but yeah, takes a village, doesn't it? So,
Yeah.
so here's what I know about Montana. And I know that you said you're in Missoula, which is an actual city with a hospital. Okay. Now, my sister-in-law gave birth on the ranch because it was about an hour south of Missoula. And, the thought of just the long drive. And I've interviewed several people who gave birth in Montana, and it was also all home births for the same reason, like really rural and having to drive a very long distance to get to a hospital. So here you are, thankfully, kind of like in the bigger city with the hospital. But I know a lot of Montanans plan home birth. It's very common. Was before you found out it was twins, like, were you like, I'm giving birth in a hospital already, or did you have to pivot your plan?
No, I had planned to use the hospital. I had a really great OB who I really trusted and really just appreciated who he was as a human. And so to me that, and especially with twins, I think it's whatever the mom feels most aligned with is where they should go,
Yeah.
whether it's home birth or being in the hospital. It's a very personal decision. And I think, you've got to pick what's right for you. And for us, I'm glad that I ended up going that route because I really wanted to have a natural birth with my twins. And I was in labor for like 21 hours and it just wasn't going as planned. And so I ended up having to do a C-section with them. And so, I really just have found that with pregnancy, you have to go with the flow and they're going to come on their own timeline and in their own way. And so you just really have to be flexible and open to kind of however it shakes out. I mean, for me, that's what I found, but I'm sure it's a little different for everybody.
It is. And I will tell you right now, Holly, there's a lot of people listening from all over the world that are like, jaw just dropped open because you said you labored for 21 hours with twins. There are many hospitals all over the world that wouldn't even allow you to labor with twins. So can you share a little bit about that? Were they both head down? Like, was this hospital just open to vaginal birth twins?
So yes, I was really hoping, like I said, you have a vision as a mother of how you want it to go. And my water had broken the night before, and my one that had dropped first, his shoulder, he was stuck at the shoulder and just could not make it through. And so once he was down at that level, I think it was maybe like 2 hours, and they finally said, we have to do a C-section. So it was, like I said, I had one vision. It just wasn't going as planned. And for the safety of babies and for me, we decided to pivot.
Yeah. Well, I think it's just absolutely amazing that they as in the hospital and your OB allowed you to try, because so many people get the news that they're pregnant with twins and then they're just like scheduled C-section. They don't really have the choice of that autonomy. So very cool about your OB and your birthing place. So now you said you wanted to have a natural birth. At the time they called the C-section, were you still unmedicated?
So here's the deal. So for me, because I was having so much pain and because it had been going on for so long,
Okay.
they did finally do an epidural
Okay.
and so that also made for me, it was hard for me to know how hard I was pushing. And I think, it's one of those things. And that's why I also wanted to have it natural so that I could, be more in control of being able to feel. And it's hard, once you're medicated, you can't always, tell what's happening. And so that was a tricky part of it as well. So it was kind of an added layer that we had to navigate.
Yeah. Well, the reason I asked that question, Holly, is because in my city, Charlotte, North Carolina, they actually do allow vaginal births for twins as long as baby A is head down, even if baby B is breech or flips breech after baby A is born. But one of the requirements is an epidural. And the reason is you have to give birth in the operating room, with an epidural, because just in case they have to go to a cesarean section, they want you to be awake. So there's just all of these nuances with twins that I think you like go to that ultrasound and you find out. And then you really have to dig deep with what your birthing location allows and what their recommendations are. So I would say from the city that I practice in, where you gave birth was very open. So quite cool. So you gave birth via cesarean section to both of your first two boys. And then for your second and third children that were born, did you have scheduled cesarean sections then?
So we did. And so it was really interesting because, from my first pregnancy with my twins to having my second, or technically my third child, it was scheduled. So I was telling my husband, it's like scheduling a haircut or something, like it felt very different of like, you're having your baby at, 3 o'clock or, whatever. It was a much different experience, but it went a lot smoother. And it was, like I said, it was, it was a lot less intensive of a process. It's still very intense having a C-section. I mean, it's not an easy procedure to undergo or recover from. I mean, it takes time. And again, because we'd had twins just literally like a year before he arrived, it was just for safety and that sort of thing that we opted for C-section. And again, I ended up doing it for my fourth. So it was just, like I said, I really wanted to do natural. That was really in my mind frame. But because of the way my pregnancies rolled out, I ended up just having to pivot. And that was really okay.
Yeah. As a doula who's been to over 1,000 births now in 22 years, I would say I haven't been to many births where there wasn't a pivot at some point too. I think that's part of the journey and part of the lesson. I think parenthood starts in your pregnancy and learning about how to surrender, even from things like as simple as morning sickness that can start right away. So if you had to give advice to the C-section moms out there, what is like the one or two things that you think helped you with the recovery the most?
Yeah, I think, you want to keep moving, so keep moving. One thing that I kind of learned after the fact that was to also like with the scar tissue to once the staples or however they stitch you back together, once those are healed, to massage the scar tissue to help keep it from becoming too coarse or, you know what I'm saying? So just to kind of help smooth and soften that scar, to actually just with your own hand massage it a little bit every day just to help with that healing process. That's something that I don't feel like is really shared with most people. I found that to be helpful. But again, so I think it's movement, taking care of yourself, and really maybe for the first 6 weeks post C-section to really just take care of yourself and realize you're not going to be able to just like jump back into your normal everyday living. Like if you're really active, that you need to go a little bit slower. You need to just take care of yourself, really enjoy the newness of having a baby to snuggle, and you will get back on your feet, but it does take a little time.
It really does. Now, I know in your book and in your framework, self-care is what you call like really the secret to parenting. And so I think that's what you're describing, is it starting at the very beginning, right after birth. But Holly, how in the world did this come about? Like, what was your job before your job now?
Yeah, so I was actually a nurse. I worked neuro nursing, and so I love taking care of people. I love helping people. I love helping inspire wellness. And so I was a nurse in my past life, and so that was. But I worked 3 nights. I would do 3 12s, and so when I got pregnant with twins, we just decided like, hey, we want to be present for our kids, and so my husband has always been supportive, and so we decided that I would pivot from working in the hospital so that we could raise our kids, and so. For me, that was really a blessing. I did try to go back for a short time after they were born, but we had some life stuff that happened, and so I ended up not fully integrating back into the hospital. But I love being a nurse, and so for me, I still want to give back, but now I'm doing it. Podcasting. I'm getting to connect with amazing people like you to help spread good stuff in the world, and writing my book, and just being active in this way for me is very fulfilling.
Yes. And I love interviewing people like you, Holly, who have 4 boys and are busy parents and still have that kind of light and drive to do more and to give to others and to kind of pass the torch with our wisdom that we gain through parenting. So, first of all, thank you so much for what you do. How old are the boys now?
Yeah, so our twins are 14. We have one that's 13 and one that's 10. So we're kind of in this next phase of life.
Mm-hmm.
Our oldest one's just started driving, which is crazy. They're going to be 15 this summer, but we're just in this next chapter. It's kind of fun to witness who they're becoming and stepping more into their manhood. I mean, we're not there yet, but I can see the horizon now. I feel like we're on the other side a little bit. So
Yeah,
shifting.
my oldest is turning 11 and my youngest is like 9 turning 10. And I will say my 9 turning 10 is still like in that like attached to mommy, like not trying to let go, but the almost 11-year-old is now starting to do the like let go, pull away thing. And I'm grieving this loss of like, okay, I mean, I need to like let them go do their thing, but you can feel this big shift in parenting when they start to kind of become their own person and, don't want to sleep in your bed anymore, was
I know.
which was so hard for me. So let's talk about your book, Stop, Drop, Grow, and Glow, and your podcast. Let's kick it off with what you call the 5 rights of parenting.
Sure. So the 5 rights of parenting are designed to be a quick way to touch base with yourself on how you're presenting as a parent. And really, they work to ensure you're doing the right thing and not causing unnecessary harm to your child or yourself in the process of parenting. So you want to think of these rights as a supportive parenting protocol. And these really were a spinoff of there's something called the 5 rights of medication administration. So I, use some of my nursing knowledge to really put a spin on these in a parenting way. So with the 5 rights of medication, it's where so you've got the right patient, the right dose, the right route, that sort of thing, to help make sure you're keeping your patient safe. I wanted to create something that would help parents. So I took my nursing knowledge and infused it into parenting. So the first one is right now. And this one is really about being in the moment with your child, and being present. So you're not texting or working on multiple different things while your child needs you. When you show up, you want to really show up and be all in. If you can't put aside what you're doing, which is a reality, obviously, you're going to have moments where you're like, I can't hang out or play right at this moment. But you want to give your child a hug and set a time that just the two of you can connect when you find a place to take a break. Because in parenting, there are no repeats and time is ever fleeting. So you really want to maximize that precious time you have and live in the moment as often as possible. So that's the first one.
Okay, I'm going to tell you right there that like that one, like emotions came forward for me because it's very hard when I pick them up from school and that's very intentional, but it's like a 10-minute drive home. And then when we get home, I usually have to go back to work and they're just craving me because they've been at school all day and they just want like to tell me all about what happened at school and what's going on. And that's something I really struggle with is like saying, at 5 o'clock, you have my undivided full attention. We're going for a walk together. We're having one-on-one time together. But I really struggle that last hour and a half of work.
I think that's really valid. And I think a lot of parents have that struggle too of like, you sometimes you have other commitments that you have to prioritize as well. So it can be really a fine juggling act to meet all of your demands with grace. And that's where I think though, you're setting a time with your sons of like, you're giving them that validation by saying at 5 o'clock, I'm all yours. Like good for you for, even if you can't be there right when they want you, you're still meeting their needs by telling them that you're going to show up. And so I think that's really huge.
Yeah.
So good job.
Thank you.
The second one is right intent. And this one is about being intentional with the choices you make, the guidelines you set, and how you treat your children. So if you don't know why you're doing what you're doing, it might be time to reevaluate your parenting strategy. So, if you're on autopilot or you're just doing, like you're, passing on, how you were treated as a child, but it didn't always maybe feel good, to maybe just get curious and do a deep dive. Because I think for so many parents, they get thrown into parenthood. Most parents don't have time to read books or do much else, besides just be with their kids. And so it's an opportunity to maybe educate yourself a little or get curious about other ways of being around your child to strengthen connection and relationships. And so I think that this one is just really about being intentional.
Holly, so again, in my own life, I think as you're speaking, I'm the student here and you're the teacher, and I'm thinking I don't have everything right. So just this year, I had my kids go to therapy, proactive care versus reactive care, to have someone to talk to. And then they invite me into some of their sessions, and it's been quite nice. And one of the things that came forward with intention was the one-on-one time. Both of my children said it's very hard to share the attention, especially since they're only a year apart. They play on all the same sports teams. So what we started doing is implementing one-on-one time, where they'll even go to their grandparents like one night, and one of them will, and then the other one will stay home. And that has
So
been everything.
I think that's so awesome. We do something similar, and we started that because we started with four. It's hard because it is such a different dynamic when you're all together versus one-on-one. And so I love that you bring that up, because we called it special time when our kids, especially like when they went to preschool and they were little, I often would take, if there was three of them going, I would keep one home with me and we would rotate so that we could have that really special, valuable time with them. To grow that connection, but also just to get to know who they are without their siblings. It's really an awesome thing to weave into your everyday life if you can, or on weekends or with grandparents or however you want to do that. I think it's really valuable.
And I know in the book you have more tips on intention, but I
Yeah.
just love that that's one of the 5 pillars for you.
Thank you. The third one is the right use of speech. And so this one's powerful. Your voice is a tool of creation. And so you have that power to uplift or tear down. And this can be one of the toughest rights to implement. So one of the practices really in remembering to speak with mindfulness. And if you forget, which you will, because we're human, you want to apologize. And so I really believe in the power of apology. And, if you misspeak, to really, say you're sorry and try to role model for your kids, like, hey, you are only human, and you're not always going to say necessarily what you mean. You might be triggered, or you might have something, maybe didn't sleep, or you were cranky when you're trying to get your shoes on to get out the door for school, or whatever it is. There's always lots of little moments that can feel tricky for parents, when you don't show up the way you want to make reparations if need be.
Do you have an example in your own life about that?
Well, I think for me, I really try to become more like, if I'm feeling triggered or if something's happening, that I'm feeling a little more up, that I try to pause before I speak, because I found that, and something that I'll maybe talk about with you later, is reaction versus response. So, if you've got siblings that are fighting, right? So you've got two kids that are fighting, that's a common issue, instead of being like, hey, knock it off, that you pause, give yourself, 3 or 4 seconds to like cool your own jets before you just like start, into dragon mode or whatever, might be showing up for you. And then step into that to try to help resolve. Because I think when you give yourself those couple of seconds, it really helps you pivot in a way that's more intentional. And so that's, kind of a simple strategy to help you remember your manners before you open your mouth. So hopefully that was helpful, because it's hard, and it's also hard to pause. Like when you're feeling triggered, it's hard to like take a breath and give yourself a minute to remember that you're the one leading the family, right? So instead of getting sucked into their tornado, that you have to be that guiding light to help them redirect whatever's going on.
I think tornado is a great word for raising all children, but especially boys. And I will say one of the ways that this parenting strategy has shown up in our life that was surprising for me when I was going through your framework is sometimes my children are upset about language or tone that I'm confused about. Like, I think as a doula and a nurturer, I'm by nature kind of a little bit calm in my parenting and don't raise my voice. Like, my boys have never been like spanked or grabbed or, yelled at. But every now and then, if my voice just goes up a tiny bit, where in no way I'm yelling, they're like, "Why are you yelling at me?" And I'm like, so I have to take my own kind of ego and righteousness out of it, validate their feelings. Like, instead of just saying like, "I'm not yelling at you," I have to say like, "I am very sorry that felt like, uncomfortable for you." Even though I want to be like, "I'm not yelling. You've never been yelled at in your life. You have no idea what yelling is like." So I have all these thoughts in my head, but, I really try to take ownership of how they're feeling versus my inner child coming forward to argue with how they're feeling.
Absolutely. No, I think that's a great example. Um, so the fourth one is the right use of power. So this one is really about learning to wield your power with care. You are the one responsible for setting boundaries, discipline, and you ultimately have the final say on whatever issues might arise along the 18 years you're blessed to have your children under your roof. So you want to work to not abuse this power and be intentional in the framework that you set for your child. So this is, really checking in with yourself on your own boundaries, and that can span a lot of different things. And I also really like the idea of inviting your kids to, once they get old enough to really check in with like, do you have any boundaries? Is there anything that would be helpful for you to start fostering or nurturing in your own life to help them? Also, because I think boundaries are such a helpful and healthy thing to have, because you know what you stand for and you know what you're not willing to invite into your life, and so it gives them a stronger foundation and framework to operate from, because they know what's okay and what's not okay, and it helps them to really have more awareness in their own life, and it helps you to have more awareness in your life too, because as a parent it's really important to have those things in place, and if you don't, it can make for a bumpier ride.
Now, I would like to ask you in your own life about boundaries. I find in my women's circles and my mothering circles, there's just so many different opinions. And sometimes I find like if I share some part of my parenting or my parenting boundaries, it's met with a lot of judgment. So I was wondering like how you as a parent kind of share, and it could be anything like I'm going to give an example: homeschool versus public school or private school, vaccinating versus not vaccinating, co-sleeping versus not co-sleeping. These are just some examples of like in my life boundaries that I set with parenting of like and right now, since we're 9 and 10, I call it like free range, like roaming, right? Like letting them roam the neighborhood versus some people would never let their kids out the front door, alone. So I was just sort of thinking about like, you put this in your book and in your framework for a reason, but do you find like that you get like people, does that make sense? Like people kind of in contention about like, well, my
Yeah.
boundaries are different than your boundaries as a mother.
Well, and so what I would say to that is that you are entitled to feel and parent how you want to feel and parent. And I'm really not into judgment. Like for me, that's one of those things where, I know who I am, I know what I stand for, and and I'm really okay with other people being who they need to be. And we might not agree on every issue, but that's okay to me. Like I still want to sit down and learn from you, because you might open a door that had been closed for me, So for me, I think it's really easy to sit down with people who think just like you or maybe parent just like you. But I think there's really an opportunity for growth if you're willing to sit down and maybe learn from parents who do things differently. Like, well, why do you do it that way? Or why, it's an opportunity and an invitation to maybe to grow. That's the way I view it. I know some people, maybe aren't willing to sit down and talk to people who do things differently, and that's their choice. For me, I really like to keep my mind open, and I appreciate that there are different ways to do the same thing. And so that's how I feel about it.
Yeah, I really love that response. Thank you. I think one of the ways in which I find this a struggle also is that my children may, have some words for me about why they are or are not allowed to do something. And I'll give an example like technology is a boundary for us. There are very strict limits on technology, and technology is something that has to be earned. It's not a right. And some of their friends, it's just a right. And there's no time limits. And so having these meaningful discussions with my children, even if they disagree with my boundary, my ultimate feeling is that when they grow up, they'll understand boundaries.
Absolutely. And that's what it starts in childhood, and you're helping them to shape those. So it's, I think, good on you. So the last right is the right use of love. And this is by far my favorite right. I believe that love is the cure for all that ails us, parenting and beyond. And this right should be used as many times a day as you can aspire to. Letting your child know how much you love them and are there for them is going to really plant their spirit in deep, rich soil as they grow. So I think you really want to give your love freely and without expectation. Your child is often going to mirror the love you give them. But even if they don't, as they start getting older, that love is being received and it's being felt, and it does make a difference. So I think that this is such an important piece to touch base with every day, multiple times if you can.
Yeah. And this, for those of you listening, because you're pregnant and you like birth stories or you're new parents, this starts for me as a doula and teaching about skin to skin contact immediately after birth, and then for hours and hours and hours a day for the first year, as long as possible. So part of that love is that those kisses and saying I love you and affirming how wonderful they are. But I think it really begins with that physical touch. The babies don't know they're outside of the womb, and it's very important. This is one of those parenting judgments that I probably shouldn't, but it's important to me. It's very important that you try not to put the baby down as much as possible. I really try to teach my doula clients about just laying in bed, skin to skin, resting. I am a firm believer in co-sleeping, which I know is quite controversial, but even if you're not co-sleeping, really trying to get that skin to skin. And I think that's a beautiful form of love that we can have right from the beginning.
I agree. I think it's super important.
Mm-hmm. Now, I know in the book there is the secret sauce of parenting, which is your well care and your self care. So let's dig into that a little bit, because I find that to be the absolute most difficult part of parenting.
Yeah, I think it is, and that's something that I really promote and advocate for the most. And I do think it's a secret sauce in parenting, and because I think that if you want to truly thrive, you can't leave self-care out. If you're tending to your heart and your personal well-being on the regular, it's going to make it much easier to joyfully care for others. And any parent can tell you, I mean, you're on 24/7, and so I really think that self-care should be taken care of and tended to daily. And so even 5 minutes, if you're in the throes of parenting and you're like, I have no time to take care of myself, start with 5 minutes a day, start small. And it can be even just doing some deep breathing. Put a hand on your heart, a hand on your belly, and just breathe. Do some deep breathing. Calm your nervous system. Do it before your kids get up, or do it after you drop them off at school. And you're like, you can park somewhere and just sit for a couple of minutes, maybe before you go to work. Um, you can start there, but what I found, like for me, I have a really beautiful practice where I like to get up before my family wakes up, and I go down and I make my green tea, and I sit in meditation before my family wakes up, because it gives me a moment to really set the intention for my day, to get grounded, to be grateful. And so then when they come downstairs, I'm ready to receive them. So for me, that's an example of how I'm practicing every day, and that's something that I can do at home. I usually light a candle, or I have an infrared heater that I like to sit under. So I add a couple layers to it that feel really nourishing for me. But that's been something I've been doing for years. I love that. And my kids also really respect that. So even if they wake up and I'm doing that, they'll come sit next to me or they'll do their own thing, but they really embrace it. That's part of my morning routine. And so that's an offering for you as well. Like if that's something that's calling, or maybe it's after they go to bed. There's lots of ways to do self-care. So, it can be, even like doing a date night with your significant other, get out and have a night that's just the two of you. Keep dreaming. Just because you become a parent doesn't mean you have to stop dreaming. So keep taking care of yourself in ways that are outside of what it means to be a mother or father. That's going to help you feel cared for. You can also make your morning coffee or tea feel like a ritual. You can put on soft music. You can do little things. Something I've talked about in other connections with people is microdosing your self-care. So lots of little things will add up to help you feel cared for by the time your head hits the pillow at night. So I think especially as a parent, going that route can be really helpful.
Yeah. And I want to just echo that, you guys, this begins in your pregnancy. If you don't already have those rituals, and if you do, you have to carry them forward into your pregnancy and new parenthood from day one. Like, you have given birth, it's day one, your whole life changed. But if on that day you can find a way to even turn the most mundane thing into a ritual or something special, and I share on this all the time, but the one thing that I say to all of my doula clients is, you have to shower, right? You have to, even right after you give birth, you're covered in blood, you have to take a shower. Turn the lights off, put on the spa music, light one candle, put one of those lavender things in the shower, and don't rush through it. Like, take your time for that self-care on day one. So I really think, Holly, that you have nailed it. And I love that it followed the framework or was inspired from your nursing background. So as we close and talking about Stop, Drop, Grow, and Glow, your parenting book, what is the best way for my audience to be inspired by you and to grab a copy of your book and to really just get all of the tips and tricks about being the best version of themselves in this parenting journey?
Sure. Yeah. So you can connect with me. I have a website, which is liveyourglow.live. If you want to connect with me there, you can see what I'm up to. I'm also on Instagram. So my handle is at Holly Swenson _ live your glow. Those are both great ways to connect. And my book, if you're interested, it's on Audible. I narrated it for all the busy parents because I really wanted people to be able to connect in the easiest way possible. So it's available on Audible and anywhere you buy your audiobooks. It's also available on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, and anywhere you buy your books. And so I just created this 4-part framework to help take parenting to the next level. And really the intention is to bring more peace, patience, intentionality, and joy. So the aim is really for my method to help you revolutionize the way you parent, help you align with how you want to show up for your family, and also show you how to tend to your own heart in the process.
Wonderful, Holly. And I will link to everything in the show notes in case you're folding laundry right now or driving around or out for a run while you're listening to this podcast. You can always come back to the show notes and get those links to interact with Holly. So thank you so much for being here and teaching us about your wisdom. And hopefully everyone can take away some pearl of this episode right now to implement into their parenting journey.
Thank you so much, Heidi. It was really a privilege and joy to connect with you today.
Thank you for listening to Birth Story. My goal is you will walk away from each episode with a clear picture of how labor and delivery might go, and that you will feel empowered by the end of your pregnancy to speak up, plan, and prepare for the birth you want, no matter what that looks like.